I think being a bit older is a great thing, and as long as you keep your mind active. And I'd rather lose my ability to move than use my ability to talk and think.
Hello, I'm Catherine Fairweather, and welcome back to The Third Act, brought to you by Orions, the gold standard in later living. This week, I'm delighted to introduce Graydon Carter as he enters the next phase of an extraordinary career. A legendary editor and a Renaissance man, he was at the helm of Vanity Fair for nearly 3 decades, before leaving to start and recently sell his own successful digital magazine, Airmail. Notorious as the man who wasn't afraid to call Donald Trump a short-fingered vulgarian, these and other vivid revelations are in his memoir, When the Going Was Good, consistently on the New York Times bestseller list. A witty look at the excesses of the world of journalism when New York City seemed to define glamour and be at the centre of everything that we wanted to be part of. Graydon, thank you for coming to talk to me today. Let's begin with your memoir. It's an anecdote-packed saunter through the golden era of journalism, magazine journalism in the 80s and 90s. Is that golden era gone, do you think?
Oh, yeah, no, golden eras never last very long. I mean, and they just don't last, and that's why they're called golden eras. If they're still ongoing, you probably wouldn't call it that. But, you know, there's a golden era for everything. There was a golden era for the movie studios in the 1930s and 40s. There was a golden era for television, you know, broadcast television in the 60s through the end of the last century. There was a golden age for magazines, and there's probably a golden age for podcasts right now.
I mean, as you said yourself, when you're in the golden era, you'd only know it's golden when it's gone. What do you think was so special about those times?
Well, you know, it's before the internet, which gobbled up a lot of advertising. And advertising largely paid for the journalism. And at Vanity Fair, we were very fortunate that we had wonderful, loyal advertisers who paid upwards of $100,000 a page, sometimes with, you know, up to 250 pages in an issue. And our journalism was expensive, and this helped fund it. So it was before the internet. It was a boom time in America. The economy was very healthy in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and into the aughts. And aside from the incoming money, is the magazines were really good during that period. And magazine publishers attracted the best young candidates out of school, the sort of same people who went to dot-com businesses after that and are now sort of flooding into AI factories. But you got the best and the brightest, and you could train them. And it's when journalism was really fun.
Yeah, and it's the sheer fun of it all that really comes across. You just seem to have had the most incredible times. I mean, it makes your life look gilded, but of course you were a grafter. You were a proper grafter, a 5 a.m. in the morning grafter.
I mean, because the competition was so stiff, you worked under great anxiety and worry all the time that somebody was going to get the story earlier and do it better. And that's what drove you. And I slept well at night, but when I woke up in the morning, it was just full on for the next, say, 12, 14 hours. But it was an enjoyable level of anxiety and worry and work because you were surrounded by wonderful colleagues. At least at Vanity Fair, I worked with for most of them 25 years. And before that at Spy Magazine, we had a sort of tightly knit group that worked together like just incredibly closely for 5 years.
I mean, you say that you're an anxious editor, but in fact, you strike me when I read this book as someone who's incredibly balanced. I bet you didn't have too many sleepless nights, even on the eve of the big scoop.
No, I have my one little superpower is that I can fall asleep in under 5 minutes, either in the afternoon, because I've taken a siesta probably every afternoon for the last half century, and for sometimes just 5 minutes, and I wake up completely refreshed, but I fall asleep really easily, and I wake up with the light.
Do you exercise still, or do you keep fit in any way?
Yeah, I do Pilates twice a week with this lovely woman in France. And I've been doing that for 15 or 20 years. And we have a gym and I swim a lot. I gave up tennis. I gave up skiing. And we go for a walk every afternoon.
And you gave up smoking cigarettes a long time ago.
Well, I have one a day. I had one just before this. So I have one around 11 o'clock and it sort of sets me up for the day. My mother lived to be 97 and smoked a cigarette a day.
But how do you manage in LA with, I thought it was hilarious that you gave away ashtrays and lighters at the Oscars and that they were all stolen in a culture where smoking was totally a no-no.
First of all, in Los Angeles, they look down their nose at smoking, but if somebody at a dinner table opens a package of cigarettes, they're gone in about 30 minutes because everybody will have one cigarette, a social cigarette. And we had actually cigarette girls at the Oscar party. They're sort of dressed with pillbox hats and sort of short skirts like they had in old-fashioned sort of movie houses, giving out cigarettes. And we had ashtrays and Zippo lighters on the table, and they were intended to be stolen. It's sort of free advertising sprinkled around town, what young people now call branding. And
your expense accounts were extraordinary also. You had the budgets to do things like that in those days.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we had very healthy budgets. Remember, I also did 3 publications on a shoestring before I got to Vanity Fair, and you can have just as much enjoyment at a shoestring operation as you can at a big, lush, financially sound place like Vanity Fair. It's all about the people you hire.
Of course. And actually, being on a shoestring forces you to be creative. You've got to be creative.
Very, yes. But then at the same time, if you have all the benefits in the world like we did at Vanity Fair, creativity matters as much because there's great responsibility put on you and everybody's looking at you and watching to see that if you're going to do something interesting or something boring. And we, believe it or not, we strove for the interesting part rather than the boring part.
Do you think editors have become more boring now, today?
No, they've probably become more cautious in some cases, but there are still some great editors around. I love that. We just talked about Britain for a second. The Oldie, Private Eye, all the shelter magazines, the Condé Nast, they're firing on all cylinders. And in America, you've got The Atlantic and New Yorker and New York Magazine. The Economist is still, doing wonderfully. So you do have great editors out there. There are just fewer places to be an editor.
I wonder with Airmail, do you have that same sort of interaction and collaboration with all your editors there? Are you in an office? Do you see each other? Do you soundboard each other every day?
Yeah, no, I didn't want, when we went looking for office space, I didn't want any place where you needed a swipe card to get in. So we're on the parlor floor of a sort of once grand townhouse in Greenwich Village. And I had a table, a dining room table from my house in the village that we sold. We moved into an apartment. And the table is about 20 feet long. And so everybody sits at one table, and it's pretty democratic. And there's probably 8 or 9 of them in there, the young people in there every single day. I care a lot about creating a good office culture where it's collaborative, respectful, collegial, and rather than office cultures where they pit 2 people against each other and see who wins.
And that's why people have stayed with you, or editors have stayed with you for such a long time, because it is so collegial and collaborative and good fun.
Yes.
And you're very unusual as an editor, by the way, for one, acknowledging any pitch immediately, and also for that amazing, even though it's now electronic thank you, I love the electronic thank you that we all get when we shoot off some little piece for Airmail. I think it's so polite and respectful.
Well, that's my wife's company. It's Electrogram, and I found I loved working for a company that appreciated what I did, and Cy Newhouse was very appreciative, and so I thank the advertisers every issue. I thank the illustrators, and I thank the writers every issue, because without them, it would just be a blank slate.
Of course. So I know it's really quite hard to look at yourself from a distance and say what it is that makes you such a great editor, apart from this thing I've just mentioned of politeness and courtesy. I know what I think your talents are, but can you pinpoint yourself what you think made you such a successful editor for such a long time?
Well, first of all, I had the benefit of working for one of the great proprietors of all time, Cy Newhouse. But I think I treated people fairly. I hate drama in the office, so therefore the office did have drama, but drama that you couldn't control. I tried to control the drama I could control. And I think that I love a good story, and I'm not a great journalist myself. I was sort of too embarrassed to ask very difficult questions. But I know a good story when I see one, and I know I can identify somebody who can write a good story.
That's pretty key, isn't it? And you're fearless, which I think you can't be an editor without being fearless.
Well, not completely fearless. I mean, difficult stories go through legal review and everything's fact checked. So that eliminates a certain level of fear. But also if you work with the same people year in, year out, you know their strengths and weaknesses, and hopefully there's many more strengths than there are weaknesses. That helps a lot in terms of not being overly worried about certain stories.
Right. I mean, as you say yourself, you were terrified when you started that you were going to be sacked at any second at the beginning of the Vanity Fair in the post-Tina Brown era. And yet you were brave enough not to take on Norman Mailer, who was a superstar, wasn't he, at the time?
Brave and foolish are on a very fine knife edge. He'd done a story for us on the Democratic National Convention in 1992. And I inherited the story, and it just wasn't very good. And I think he'd sort of phoned it in, as we say in journalism, and I killed it, and he was not pleased with that. But looking back, I thought, God, it's Norman Mailer. I should have probably just run it, good or bad, just for the byline.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's, I think, what maybe I would have done, and so I'm full of admiration for that. But tell me, what makes good writing? You talk about good writing. I mean, are there words that make your teeth itch? Do you ban a whole raft of words?
Yes. When I got to Vanity Fair, there were two things I wanted to change. I wanted to change the office culture, because it had been very much that sort of culture of pitting two people against each other. And I wanted a collegial, drama-free culture where people would say, please, thank you, and all the rest of it. And then part of it was trying to change the Baroque house writing style, which was, a book wasn't a book, it was a tome. A party wasn't a party, it was a fit. People didn't say something funny, they chortled or they quipped. I hate the expressions A-list or celebrity. Anyway, I started a list and we banned these words, and it grew to probably, 6 words, and they continued into airmail. And I mean, good writing is clear writing, and good writing is simple writing. And not everybody can get it across the way Tom Wolfe could say. So it just cleaning the language was like a sponge bath for the entire sort of language of the magazine. That took 2 years.
Talking about euphemisms, I mean, death and aging until recently have been passed over. You can't say somebody's dying. You have to talk about them passing, don't you?
I hate that expression so much. My beloved sister, when my father died, she called me, and she was in Canada. And she called me and said, Dad passed last night. And I said, oh, God. And I was very sad. But then I was sort of upset that she'd used the word passed instead of died. I felt really small about that, by the way.
And what about reaching out? I don't really like reaching out. Everyone's always reaching out. But that's an Americanism, isn't it?
No, I have a feeling it's an everythingism, everywhereism now. I mean, there's reaching out, there's unpacking something. But reaching out, it actually is sort of useful. The word that drives me crazy today is gifted, or gift as a verb. To me, gift is a noun, and you can give somebody something, but I'm not quite sure what the difference between that and gift is. Anyway, there's a lot of people and people even saying no worries, but that, one generation always complains about the language of the generation that comes after them.
Of course. And now, of course, we have the extra dimension of not being able to say certain words, like, as a travel writer, the word exotic is a no-no. I can't use that word anymore because you're othering people.
I've never used the word othering, but I have a rough idea what it means.
I like that you don't know what othering is. That's great. So you carry on and you do your thing that you do so well, and you're not really concerned with the sort of noise outside and what's offensive and what people find okay and not okay. You just commission the stories you like.
Yes, but in terms of the language, it's probably much more toned down in the terms of political correctness than it was, say, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And so you do pay attention to the sensitivities of the times, which we can always change. So it's not without sensitivity, but I care about the language than about sort of temporary shifts in the words people use, because a lot of them won't last.
You say that a good story has a narrative arc, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you also say that it's important to know your exit strategy before you make the entrance. And I think that is an interesting mindset, because this is also a beginning where we're in your third act. You've started a whole new digital magazine. It's a new phase in your life, isn't it?
Well, it's funny because when I was at Vanity Fair, and at one point I had 5 kids, and I was a sole breadwinner family, and I always had, in case I lost the job, I sort of dabbled in documentaries, and I was part owner of a restaurant or 3 restaurants, and I did a Broadway play, and I thought if I lose the job, I'm not going to be broke, and I can write as well. So the entire run of Vanity Fair, I had a sort of plan B and a plan C, just in terms of making a living. And then when I left Vanity Fair, I was working on a book of imaginary characters. I'm very good at drawing desiccated men from the middle of the last century, and it's my specialty. And so then I have all these drawings, and they're with imaginary biographies of them, and they go into categories. And so I was working on that. But I used to always go into town, or go to the newsstand on 8th Avenue in New York and pick up all the weekend newspapers, out-of-town newspapers, and I'd read them, and they helped form the basis of stories at the New York Observer and Spy Magazine and Vanity Fair. And when we were living in France, I thought, I'd still do this. I thought I just started sending interesting pieces back to friends in America that they probably wouldn't have seen. And I thought, we can make a package out of this. And so it started off as kind of a hobby, and now it's a somewhat successful one.
Yes, and you, in your first chapter, I think you talk about your definition of a successful life was good marriage and children and living in New York and being in magazines, and you seem to have achieved all those goals.
Yeah, no, I was really lucky, and those were my goals. And, I had a lot of help along the way to get there. Nobody does this all by themselves, but they're both a low bar and a high bar of things to achieve. But I love being around my kids, and I love being around my wife. And I love my dog. So,
What's the key to a successful marriage, Graydon?
Just being devoted and appreciating every single aspect of every person in your life, good and bad, and nobody's perfect. And just trying to be a really good dad and a good husband as best you can, with many little failures along the way, obviously.
And I suppose you have to practice patience as well, don't you?
I'm much better at patience at 75 than I was at 55.
I was going to ask you, do you still find the same things funny and sad that you did when you were 20?
I find the same thing sad, but it's funny because I was talking with somebody the other day about going back and watching Monty Python, which I thought was funny and brilliant when I saw it when I was a kid. And I watched a couple of episodes with one of my kids the other day, and I thought none of it was funny. I reread On the Road with Jack Kerouac, which I thought at 20 was the most brilliant novel ever written. And I came away thinking that Truman Capote was right about Jack Kerouac, that this wasn't writing, this is typing. And so, I think you grow out of things in terms of humor or, say, literature at times. But a lot of things are consistent all the way through. There was a television show in America called Sergeant Bilko with Phil Silvers, and it's about a little army platoon in a boring pocket of Midwestern America. And it was the funniest show on television to me in the 1950s and early 60s. And it still is. We have all the DVDs of it, and we still watch this show, and it stands up. But not everything does.
And you're plugged into the younger generation, so you're constantly being exposed to what makes them laugh. So that will keep you young, won't it?
Well, also, my oldest daughter works in comedy development at HBO. She's an executive there. So she's introduced me to all sorts of new, young, sort of comedic talents that I never would have known before. And it takes a while to sometimes get into the mind frame of some of these people, but once you're in there, they're really brilliant.
Especially, I mean, on Instagram as well, on social media, people start there and sketches and become huge megastars, don't they?
Yes.
Which is a good side to social media, I think.
Well, the thing is, the culture today, because of the internet and YouTube and everything else, that you don't need to know somebody who owns the means of production to make a name for yourself. In the old days, you had to know somebody who owned a television network or a newspaper or a magazine company or a book publishing company. Now, if you have talent, you can just go out there and do it. And if you're good and consistent, you'll get discovered.
Yeah, and it's more democratic, I agree, much more democratic.
I mean, it's harder to make a living, but it's possible.
And what do you think about comeback kids like, I don't know, Leonard Cohen coming back later in life to do his stuff, didn't he? And what about Brian Cox in Succession making a reappearance? Is that great? Something to be celebrated?
I don't think they ever went away. Leonard Cohen never went away from my life. And Brian Cox had a very healthy character actor career. He was in like Mission Impossible movies and things like that. And I think he had a better career before Succession in a strange way. Now he's sort of famous for just telling people to fuck off and being angry all the time. Well, I thought he had a much more varied career before this.
But maybe he discovered a new audience. Maybe that, the younger generation.
Well, no, he's famous, which may not be the best thing. It means, I'm sure in the old days, Brian Cox would go sit at an outdoor cafe and watch people, and then that's part of the joy of life is people watching. I don't think he can do that now because he's the center of attention.
Yeah. So, apart from the fact that you're much more patient now than you were when you were young, what else do you like about yourself more now that you're a statesman-like figure?
I wish I was. No, I'm not a statesman. But you're sort of over the hump in terms of career-wise, but the trouble is over the hump is also the beginning of the downward slide in life. And, I still see all my friends from almost all throughout my life. I still see a friend that I was friends with 69 years ago. We were best friends 69 years ago, and we're still staying in weekly touch. And my very best friend lives just down the road from me here in Connecticut on the weekends. So having more time to see friends and be with your kids. You'd go to in the old days, you'd go to an office like, 7:30, you'd stay till 6 o'clock with this strange group of people that weren't really your family, but they were your office family. Actually, the pandemic probably helped that a bit, that you can spend more time with the people you love, for better or for worse in some cases.
I mean, the Queen said that you are only as old as you feel. On your own private age scale, where are you stuck? Do you feel like a 40-year-old? Do you feel your age?
Yeah, mentally, probably in my 40s. Physically, I'm not like some, like Iron Man athlete or anything like that. You're married to an older fellow, and you don't move as fast as you did. And I gave up tennis just because the one thing you'd want to do later in life, you don't want to fall. And tennis is an easy way to fall. And I'm a sort of clumsy person anyway. I used to fall going upstairs when I was younger. I was really, really clumsy. So I like being the 75 years smarter than you were at 55. You're a bit slower. And my grandmother lived to be 97. My mother lived to be 97. And they both smoked. My grandmother smoked up until she was in her 80s. But they kept their wits about them, and that's all I care about.
What do you make of this sort of zeitgeisty thing of that very buzzword, longevity, actually, this wish for eternal life, the elixir of immortality, of everlasting life? Do you think that's a load of nonsense that hedge funders are investing in at the moment?
Anything hedge funders and tech bros invest in, I'm not interested in. I know there's that guy, Brian, whatever it is, he thinks he's got the body and the mind of a 20-year-old. Chances are he doesn't. And he could just easily get hit by a bus as the rest of us. And life's a crapshoot. There are people who never smoke and never drink and die of a heart attack at 45. And then I remember Philip Johnson telling a friend that he was saying he had two sisters, one who was like 97 and in good shape, and one who was like 93, but she smoked and drank her entire life and wasn't in such good shape. I'd say, I'd take that 93-year-old any day. I think being bit older is a great thing, and as long as you keep your mind active. And I'd rather lose my ability to move than use my ability to talk and think.
And Graydon, what gets you up in the morning? A cup of coffee or a shower?
Oh, no, I get up and I did. Did you really want to know?
Yes.
I wake up, I do stretches, and then I go down, and I have a huge assortment of vitamins that my doctor has added one vitamin on a year, it seems. So I take about 20 vitamins in the morning, and I have coffee, and always have granola and yogurt. I read the papers, then I go up and shower, and then I start my day. And twice a week I do Pilates before I start my day, like today, just before this.
Good for you. And when you're in New York, you go to your restaurant. You still have that restaurant, do you, the Waverly?
Yes, the Waverly. And so we go there maybe a couple of nights a week. It used to be 2 doors down from our house. I mean, it's still where it is, but we used to have a house 2 doors down from it, which was because you could actually go home to pee if you wanted to. but my wife's a good cook, and we love staying in and watching television. Something that would have been considered real loser nightlife 25 years ago. But streaming television and podcasts, I think they're the primary engines of the culture right now. That if you listen to podcasts and you watch streaming series, you're up on things much more than if you go to movies and just read newspapers.
What podcast do you listen to? Anything specific?
Ruthie Rogers' podcast. I love The Rest is History. I love Smartless. I listen to Joe Scarborough in the morning and Nicole Wallace in the morning. And so mostly politics and a bit of history. Oh, I love The Rest is Entertainment with Marina Hyde and Richard Osman. And I think she's one of the funniest people in the world. But yeah, just it's sort of podcasts are what radio used to be. It's sort of radio on demand if you're a former radio listener.
I think you wrote that you have employed waiters in the magazine world because you said if anyone can manage 3 tables on a busy night, then they can achieve anything.
I mean, it's the hardest construction pipeline fitting job in the world in terms of brain power and getting things to the right place at the right time.
And you can't resist doing the seating because, like any magazine editor, you like matching the right people to the right occasion.
Well, it's very similar. It's just about making sure people are comfortable. But we treat everybody that comes into the Waverly the same. You don't make it that easy to get a reservation. But once you're in, and we teach you really well. And so that was the same. That was my philosophy at the Oscar parties. We didn't make it easy to get in. But once you got into the Oscar party, in those days, when we started this off in the mid-'90s, every big sort of like function or party, they had a little roped off VIP area, which I thought was just ridiculous, like a petting zoo. Mm. And at the Oscar party, everybody was the same. Once you got in, everybody was treated the same. So they could mingle any way they wanted. And it's not who you invite that's important so much, it's who you don't invite. So not having, say, Sean Puffy Combs and Harvey Weinstein to a function today would be a thing. But we tried to keep, I resisted the whole Kardashianization of the culture until I left Vanity Fair. I mean, they didn't appear in any issue of Vanity Fair. I probably made a mistake there, but I just...
No, you had Caitlyn, that great cover, the best cover of all.
She was an adjacent Kardashian. So not quite the same. That was because of a bigger story in terms of one of the world's most famous athletes transitioning to become a female.
That was brilliant. Was that one of your most successful covers, do you think?
No, it wasn't successful at all because it was one of the first covers we released it on the internet. So by the time the actual magazine came out, everybody had seen the photographs and knew the story. So it didn't sell particularly well, but it was a great sort of had a great halo effect for the magazine.
Fantastic. And I loved, the other one I loved, I don't know how successful that was the K.D. Lang and what she called Cindy Crawford.
That was way back when. That was Herb Ritz, and that was his idea for the cover. And that was a big thing at the time. Hard to believe, but it really was.
It really was.
Yeah, I mean, people hadn't put lesbians on the cover in any obvious way up to that point. And covers that were really big at the time, like there was one we did on Jennifer Aniston after she broke up with Brad Pitt. That was like one of the biggest selling covers of all time. And you sort of scratch your head now thinking, I can't remember why this was such a big thing.
Because everyone wants to read about heartbreak, don't they?
Yes.
Do you think that the English are more gossipy than any other nation? Do you think they have a appetite for gossip and scandal more than Americans? Or is it just a human nature to love scandal and gossip?
I think because so much of the engine of gossip and scandal is in one city, you create a force field that we don't have in America, because in America, most of it's divided between, there's pockets in Washington, D.C., in New York City, and in Los Angeles, with the 3,500 miles in between them. So we don't have that gossip energy field. There are 3 completely different groups. But I think that I have a feeling people all over the world, small cities in Uzbekistan, they're, talking over the fence about the neighbor next door. I think people love to talk about other people. It's the most fascinating subject in the world.
Last night I was at Arlington, in fact. I just go back to your restaurant, one thing. I've got a session with restaurants at the moment. We booked at 8:30 and everyone was, the restaurant was overjoyed that we had booked so late, because they said that London is becoming like New York and everyone wants to be in bed by 8:30 and they book at 6, and that was unheard of 20 years ago. And so they gave us a discount on the bill. Have you thought about doing that in Waverley?
No, we managed to do 2 to 3. You gauge your restaurant on the number of turns you have on a seat. So we managed to do 2 turns on a seat, let's say Monday to Thursday, and then 3 on Friday and Saturday, and then probably goes back to 2 on Sunday. And it's Greenwich Village, so it's a lot of younger people. But I think the pandemic had a lot to do. So, 7 o'clock became the new 8 o'clock. And it's actually better for you to eat earlier. When my wife's from London, when we first met, I got used to eating early because of my kids, because I would have dinner with my kids every night. And so she thought it was just completely bourgeois that I loved eating at 6:30 or 7. But now she's a 7 o'clocker too.
Well, I remember when I met my husband, I said, I will marry you, but I am never going to have dinner at 6 o'clock. And now we have dinner at 6 o'clock. So.
It's really nice, It means you can sort of, read or watch television before you go to bed. And get to bed at a sensible hour. And magazines and those little end of the magazine features, I always notice that, like, really hipster people, they're all in bed by 9 o'clock. They're not out partying. It's not like 1970s in Studio 54. And it's just about having a nice balance in your life. And I happen to love to read for an hour before I nod off. And it's much easier to do that at like 10 o'clock than 11:30. And I find I wake up feeling better. My mother used to say every minute you sleep before midnight is equal to like 5 minutes after midnight.
She's right. I love your last chapter on your sort of lessons for living. They're very quirky. I mean, double-sided plasmon cards. That's quite handy, isn't it? Hadn't thought of that.
It's the greatest thing I've ever done. I mean, you go to a dinner, and if it's a round table, you got to walk around the entire table to see where you're seated. And if it's double-sided place cards, you only have to walk around halfway around the table. So it speeds getting people to the table. Then, once you're at the table, let's say it's a long, thin table, and you're sitting across from somebody, and you got their name facing you, so you don't have to remember their name. You go, hi, Andrea, or hi, Frank. And if you don't know who they are, you can discreetly Google under the table who they are. And I think it's like, I don't know why everybody doesn't do it. And hopefully this will be the one thing I leave when I depart this earth, is the double-sided place card.
No, you'll also, the idea that, you have to carry a handkerchief because when all else fails, you've got something to wave in the air.
We sell them at the handkerchiefs at the Airmill shop in New York. And I have 25 uses of a handkerchief, everything from like mopping your brow to cleaning up baby vomit, blowing your nose, obviously, cleaning your glasses. And as you say, waving, I give up a signal to the opposition. You can tie it on the side of your car door, and that means you need assistance, roadside assistance. I don't leave the house. I haven't left the house for 50 years with a handkerchief.
Well, I'm glad to see that you're not giving up anytime soon. It's a bit unfair of me to land this on your lap, but if you were going to write your epitaph and, if you wanted to be remembered for something other than your plasmon cards and your handkerchief, what would you like to have written on your tombstone?
Well, first of all, a friend of mine, Cullen Murphy, said you should have double-sided tombstone, too, which I thought, I love that idea.
That's very good.
No, it makes it easier for people to find it. They don't have to walk all the way around the graveyard. And I think a good father, husband, and friend, and a halfway decent editor.
Yeah, you're all those things. And thank you so much for talking to me. It's been so fascinating. I wish I could talk to you for longer, but I hope to see you soon.
That's a pleasure, Catherine. Me too.
That brings us to the end of today's conversation. If you've enjoyed it, do explore more episodes of The Third Act, either in your favourite podcast app or by searching for The Third Act podcast on Google. And if there's someone you think would enjoy what you've heard today, please do let them know about the show. This episode was produced by Pete Norton and made possible by Orions, the gold standard in later living. I'm Catherine Fairweather, and you've been listening to The Third Act.